snowing heavily, so I don't blame people.
Yeah. You just
But
never
by the
know.
time, yeah, you never know. By the time it was over, the streets were, pretty good, and but I don't blame people at all.
Yeah, you just
It was snowy at the time.
yeah, in robes, and who wants to risk it if they don't have if they, truly don't
Yeah,
have to.
yeah. Well, let's see if my compadres roll in here pretty soon. I'm sure they will.
Damon, I'm looking for my notes on the grant subcommittee members. It's yourself, Dave, Amanda, Adrian. Is Adrian a part of the grants?
I think so.
Okay.
And I know that Kate had said she was going to drop in, but she is not officially a part of the committee.
Okay.
If you do see her show up as an audience member, it would be great if we could loop her in.
No problem. I'll look out for her. Adrian, you said?
Thanks. Kate.
Kate. Okay.
Kate Kogi.
Kate Cody. Got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For a subcommittee meeting, what is the quorum requirement?
Over half of the members.
Over half, so 3 out of 4.
Mhm.
Okay, good to know. Hello, Kate.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you today?
Doing well, thanks. Getting ready for some wintry weather. That may or may
Oh,
not.
yes. Maybe a day off on Thursday, or do you think you all would go virtual?
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say. They sent us an email like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, kind of going over like what happens in the event of snow. So I don't know. We're at stage 3 right now, so we do have some kids in person. Not a lot, but I think, yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. I have no idea. I could see it going either way. Hey,
Well,
Dave.
it sounds like we're gonna get some.
Yeah, I know, for a couple of days. Dave, I don't think, so I got another email today from Elias Alonso from the Ishtatam Foundation. I guess the mayor of Weiwei wrote to us.
I saw that, yeah.
Oh,
Well, I saw that they had connected us to the mayor. I didn't know if the mayor, I didn't see that email from the mayor, but
yeah, he sent it to me today and it's entirely in Spanish. So I used Google Translate and it sounds happy. positive words in there. So they
We'd
also
like to hear it.
they mentioned New Jersey too. Don't know why, but
Hmm.
so we'll see how that goes. I'll forward it to you guys. But yeah, so that's exciting.
Cool.
So we can draft something from our city soon and send it on over. Whew.
Oh, here's our fearless leader.
Yay.
Hello, everyone. Apologies, I'm running late. Just
No
came out of a
problem.
work meeting that ran over. How's everyone? Yeah,
Doing well. How about you?
great. I'm okay, hanging in. It's a challenging, difficult time, but managing. Yeah, hope everyone is too. Good. Well, I think we're all here, right? I was
Think so.
the late one. Okay. Very good. Well, I hope you all received the proposed agenda that I sent around to Max, and wanted to first just confirm that that looks good. That we'll start with kind of try to spend at least the first half hour or so really just trying to do sort of a rapid review of the grants, the proposals, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to look through them and kind of think about, what questions you have or what you'd recommend we do in response to the proposal. And then, so we'll just try to get all of that together. We'll have to go kind of probably one by one, but keep a good pace, and then try to bring it together to look at, well, here's the funding that we know we have. What would we like to present or recommend to the full commission next week in terms of next steps and how to respond to the proposals received. So I think those are the key items we want to cover together. Does that sound okay? Okay, excellent. So I created the proposal summary that I circulated, which I'm going to use maybe for my own note taking, just to kind of capture the comments of the committee members on the proposals. And I think we could use that has a little synopsis of each grant proposal, and then add kind of a bullet with our recommended action and any kind of follow-up questions we have that we might want to take back, either to discuss with the larger commission or to take back to the grant applicant for further information. So I can try to jot that down as we're talking today, and I'm happy to share my screen if that's useful, to keep kind of for folks to follow along, although I may have trouble going back to my own notes if I do that. So I don't know how you all feel, if that would be helpful for me to share my screen.
It might be easier just for you for us to be together, and you can just take your notes, and if we have questions,
Okay.
we can, or we can kind of maybe look at the summaries after,
Okay.
to kind of reconfirm. That way you
Okay.
don't have to go back and forth.
Perfect. Thanks. That sounds good. Last year we did this in person, so this is all new to go through this kind of work session together in this way. All right. Well, why don't we start with the first one that was on the list in no particular order, was Peace and Creative Connection Through Art from Mountainside Arts, Rachel McLaughlin. And this was a proposal to support any sister to be determined by the commission, but first choice specified would be Weiwei. So that's the first one. I would maybe just open it up for any kind of feedback around what your overall kind of review is, and recommendation, and any questions. So feel free to just jump in, and I can kind of take notes as we're talking.
Sure. I'm glad to start. So there were two proposals that focused on portraiture, making portraits between people from sister cities and Charlottesville. And I found this one to be more intriguing and probably preferable in that it reaches a lot of students. And I thought it had a greater impact on the people that would be participating, both here and in the sister cities. I think it was, it's not a perfect proposal, and I do have a number of questions related to it. But I generally, I liked it. And let's see, I can go through some of my notes if you would like. I do think that we as the commission should not be the ones to decide what a proposal, the subject of a proposal. I mean, I think the applicant should be the one to do that. In this case, they lean towards Huawei, which I think that sounds great. But personally, I think if they're making the proposal, they're the ones that should propose the particular city and not leave it up to us as the funder. But you all might have a different opinion. Let's see. So they talked about having, one of my biggest questions for the applicant was, it appears that the funding they have listed in their budget applies to the materials and needs of the Charlottesville-based participants. I could be wrong, and maybe you all interpreted it differently, but I'm curious about the funding for the similar work that would be done in Huawei or wherever they would ultimately decide. As that might, they might have a greater need for finances than even the Charlottesville-based program would. And I don't know if you all want to look at at their proposed budget. I recall it being pretty good, pretty well thought out. But I was left wondering, they're supposed to mail, the program is supposed to ultimately mail the portraits to Huawei, and then the Huawei people are supposed to mail their portraits to us. And it seems there's funding set aside for the Charlottesville-based program going there, but I don't see it, which kind of leaves me wondering, wondering about that. And would the people in Huawei have the funds to complete that part of the program? So any other comments?
Yes, I liked it too. I thought there was a lot of bang for the buck in terms of the funding requested. Of course, I didn't think about Damon's question now, which is a good question. How does the other sister city, respond or fund their side of the arrangement, the program? I really like that it did involve school children, and you're right, it appears to impact a greater number of community members than the other portraiture project. And I also appreciated that the focus was going to be on some less advantaged members of our community. So for those reasons, those would be my pluses. And my only question, and this would apply to the other portrait project too, is I would want to ask if we can be assured of reproduction rights to the beautiful photos that would be made of these portraits, because I think we really want to promote these in any way possible on our sister city site, on perhaps other Charlottesville city sites or social media, etc. So I noticed that there was in the other portrait project, there seemed to be some not closure, but we would have to ask that question. Would these artists be willing to give the rights to reproductions of their work so that we can really promote as well as possible the grants program and the outcome of whatever funding we give?
Thanks, Adrienne. Great point. Good question. Dave, do you want to go next?
I mean, my comments were pretty similar. I actually came into this discussion wondering if there might be an opportunity to sort of merge the two portraiture projects, have them collaborate, since they're both doing something similar, one with an older audience and one with, or older group of participants and one with a younger group. But I tend to agree with Damon. I think if we had to choose between the two, this is the one that I would choose. I think it's a little bit more compelling. Completely agree with Adrian on wanting to have some visibility, you know, for the work, you know, if we do fund it. So that's all I had to say.
Great. Sounds good. Kate?
Reiterating all those points, one thing I'm curious about too, it sounds like she hasn't reached out to the Boys and Girls Club yet about this. No, I'm sure that they would be down to do something like this, but I'm just curious about sort of the, I don't know, I'm a little, yeah, that's the only thing I'm curious about is, has she reached out to the Boys and Girls Club yet? I'm assuming they'll be cool with something like this, but it doesn't seem like there's been contact made there already, but I'm assuming that that would be fine down the road.
Do you anticipate any issues, Kate?
I don't. I just know, as somebody who has done grant-based programs locally before with school students, sometimes there's difficulties in making those connections or just logistics there. It would have been nice to already have that connection made going into this grant so that we knew that there was a committed group that was willing to take this on. And that being said, it sounds like an amazing project, and certainly something that I think regardless can happen. I am also curious too about funding this for the kids in wherever the sister city is. I think I don't know if the assumption is that they would foot the bill or that, I don't know, that's not entirely clear here. I agree with Damon, this just seems like supplies for our city, but this is a two-city process here, so.
That might be a question we'd want to go back to the applicant on, to ask what their thoughts were around funding the sister city to send portraits back to Charlottesville. And maybe that was an oversight too, and they would want to revise their budget. That might happen. So that, you know, I think we'd have to kind of consider whether we'd be willing to cover a little more if that were the case. And then I think the Boys and Girls Club partnership collaboration is a really important point too, Kate, and something we might also ask them to update us on and confirm that they at least try to get some confirmation that the Boys and Girls Club would support this. So we have, you know, I don't know if we'd want to make the grant a little contingent on confirming that collaboration would go ahead. So like the Ixtaton Foundation, you know, included a lot of like letters of support with their application. So they had done some of that outreach previously, but in this case, we're not sure.
I mean, from my perspective, it's not unusual when I'm writing grant proposals for my job. It's not unusual for me to kind of write them prospectively.
Yep.
You know, whenever I do that, I don't write anything that I think is unlikely that I can accomplish, but I don't necessarily contact every one of my partners or all of my speakers and get commitments in advance. So I'm not personally overly stirred by a proposal that may or may not have a firm commitment by a partner. But I do think it's important that we determine, you know, the likelihood. You know, I think all of these are going to require questions. I don't think there's a single one that I'm left with no questions and just a total thumbs up. But you know, that I'm not overly bothered by, you know, a prospective plan. Another thought that came to mind is they had proposed these Zoom parties where they get both, artists from each country together. And presuming they work with Huawei, of course, they will the participants may speak Spanish or another language. I mean, we don't know. It's a heavily indigenous part of Guatemala, and it could be that there probably would be need for interpretation. And would that be something that the applicant would recruit pro bono from someone, or would they need to find someone that would incur cost, which is not a part of their budget? So just another question for the applicant. But in general, I really liked it. And I thought it was one that we should seriously consider funding. And, their budget came in so low, I think there might be room for adding funding potentially for the Huawei side.
Great. So what I'm hearing is we probably would we tend toward wanting to approve this grant application. We do have a few questions we've articulated. And we'll want, we'd want to confirm that there is a partnership with Boys and Girls Club, but we wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if we want to make that conditional on approval, or we approve and then they can confirm later that they have a community partner. So that's something we can come back to, but I think just in the interest of time, maybe just recording that we want to move. We want to support this one, but we do have some questions that we'll want to follow up with the applicant on. Okay, does that sound fine to everyone to move forward? Okay, great. So next one is the International High School Exchange from Rebecca Hill for Besançon.
Amanda, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if we should have started this whole discussion with sort of recapping how much funding we're sort of aiming for, just so we know.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah. So is it still 12,000 or
16,000?
Okay, great.
16,000. I think it is helpful to keep those numbers in mind. We have 16,000, and the grant applications that we're reviewing today total 28,449.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay. International High School Exchange. Anyone want to jump in with some immediate kind of thoughts or recommendations on this one? And just to say, this is just a historic note is that this application, or we received a similar application last year that was conditionally approved, but was focused on Plevin and an exchange, and it got stuck a little with, it wasn't ever fully approved because there was some follow-up that was happening with the Charlottesville City Schools central office around risk in terms of study visits and kind of who is the risk holder, and some of the insurance questions and others that were being sorted. So I think one point is we want to make sure that all of that gets resolved and in this process if this moves forward, but that was where things were left off. So she's resubmitted a proposal, adapted it to the fact that Plevin is no longer one of our sister cities, and has proposed a similar model for Besançon.
Noticed here, they're also seeking funding from the America for Bulgaria Foundation, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I think they left a couple of points in there from their previous application by accident.
I don't think that foundation will be supporting.
I really liked this application, and I am overlooking the Plevin stuff. I know that it does not directly impact as great a number of people as some other projects would, but I think the impact on the 4 students who would more than likely not otherwise be able to participate in an exchange like this could be life altering. I mean, and I was an exchange student and fully get what a trip like that can do. Of course, this is only a week, but I think it really could open up, well, it would definitely open up the world to the students who would participate. The fact that they are trying to recruit students who would more than likely not have the opportunity to do something like this is really important. And I saw very little that concerned me about this program. There were a couple of points. One is, first of all, I don't know how nitpicky we are going to be about the length of applications, but this one did go over our 4-page maximum. I mean, that doesn't bother me. I actually personally kind of like a little bit more detail, but it did go over a little bit. That aside, there were 2 things that kind of jumped out at me that were just a little detail. And now that you mentioned the issue with risk reduction, it kind of brings this to the fore. In their number 19 in their application for the participants, it basically says that the students have to be over the age or 18 years of age or older to participate. I don't know if you noticed that. That was a little disappointing to me, but I suspect that it is to minimize risk and the fact that you would otherwise be taking minors out of the country, which I personally don't have a problem with. But I suspect it would be easier for those who are hosting the exchange and the school potentially, if they were to be, the official organizer. It would certainly be easier for them if the participants were over 18. Another issue that came up to me also in that same number 19 in the application was that it stated that the exchange was under the auspices of the Charlottesville Sister Cities program. And, while we are the funder, a partial funder of the program, I tend to think it would be preferable not to use the term auspices, just because some people might interpret that as us being the organizer. I would personally prefer that they use the term under the sponsorship or funding. But ultimately, I think they need to figure out, and maybe they know, who the official organizer is, whether that's Charlottesville High School or someone else. That wasn't fully clear to me. But otherwise, I really liked this proposal.
I liked it as well, although I think less so than the one we just discussed. And that has to do with, it's only 4 students. And so it's just a limited number. I had a question about, I thought that the insurance issue will need to be resolved before we, make a decision, or before it maybe funding contingency on that. And I wonder if the 18 or over has something to do with sorting out that insurance issue.
Yeah.
But the other question I had is the woman or the person seeking the grant seemed to really be concerned with offering opportunities to students that might not otherwise be able to go. And she mentioned the Charlottesville High School International Club and how it has a large makeup of immigrants or refugee students. But it's also open to any CHS student. So I thought there might be a little tension there, in the sense that if any student can apply, and I guess maybe funding wouldn't be an issue if the students felt like the trip would be covered. But I just wondered, what do you do if you get a lot of applicants across the board? How do you determine that you're going to give the opportunity to those who are immigrants or refugees, or have less opportunity? So it's just a question about who gets to go, how those selections are made. And then she did say current seniors and juniors, something juniors, but I think she might have meant rising seniors, because if all this is, this application process has begun this spring and all, you're going to be needing to focus on seniors next year. And it's a trip too, it's a physical trip. So there might be some question marks about that, even though it's November.
She, in the application specifically says that they have to be 18 by the day, basically by the departure date, which she listed as Thanksgiving week. So I think she said seniors or older juniors to kind of get towards that. Although I think she would have been better off saying that you have to be 18 by the departure of the trip, rather than saying older juniors or seniors, because
Right.
it's not the same. I mean, being an older junior is not the same as being 18 by the departure date.
Yeah.
In regards to selecting candidates, it is common, in fact, almost always the case with U.S. Department of State exchanges that are for youth, that they weight their selections based on need to some extent, especially for American participants that take part in exchanges abroad. So I don't think if they were to choose to do it, that they would be out of order in making need a factor in need and travel experience, for that matter, a factor in their selection process.
Great point. I think this need question is an important and relevant one that the Grants Committee has grappled with too in the previous scholarship discussions around travel scholarships, and what would be the evidence of need, and how would that be determined, sort of becomes the question. So we've been working previously to develop some guidelines around that for travel scholarships, but that's not fully defined yet. But it sounds like it would be good to maybe go back to the applicant at least with a question around how the selection will happen, if they're more, and how need will be determined, and see what the response from Rebecca is on that question to help us think that through. I saw there was sort of, she also implied that there could be students who will contribute to the cost too with their own resources. And I recall from last year that we even wanted to explore whether there was capacity to take more students if there was more demand. And considered whether, if we got the insurance question resolved and so forth, would we make some of the additional remaining funding from grants last year available to cover more students if there was demand and need. And so I think that was something that the Grants Committee had recommended to the Commission last year on the Plevin application, but we didn't get that far, and then COVID hit. So there was never a selection process that had commenced.
So I'll go next. Amanda, your point just now touched on my primary sort of concern with this application, which is, even though I think it's a good initiative, to me, it's a much better fit for our sort of travel scholarship program or fund. Then it's not really a project per se. And we deliberately decided to create a travel scholarship fund for these kinds of needs, as opposed to, more project-like expenditures. So I don't know if the Budget Committee has had any discussion about how much, if any, money to put into that travel scholarship fund moving forward, but to me, that's a better candidate for this application than the grant fund.
Great point. Thanks, Dave. That I was thinking a little about that too, and whether this would be a case for the travel scholarships, even though it's not kind of an organized community trip. And I don't think we've made that a requirement in the previous draft guidelines, but it sounds like it could be a case for the travel scholarships, which hasn't yet been fully developed. And there is a question around whether there is any funding for travel scholarships too. Does anyone know whether that's been discussed by the budget committee yet? Or we need to bring that to the commission's attention?
Well, Kate and I are on the budget committee, and we did have a meeting not too long ago, and there might be some capacity for that, that, you know, we could discuss. I think that the expenses that were initially anticipated as outstanding for the last year are not as great as it was initially thought it would be. So I think there's a potential for, you know, funding a trip like that. Kate, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think knowing after our last meeting with looking at the budget and seeing that we do have a little more to work with than we originally thought, this could be a good opportunity for a travel scholarship if we solidify that program and make it something like, I think that it would be a good opportunity. Like, this is exactly the type of thing that would be for, rather than applying for a grant in this regard. Because like, and part of it too is that, like, when I'm looking at the budget here, it's sort of like they're not asking for like, I don't know, we're just seeing that there's a big cost at the end of this, and like we're just gonna put money towards that because it's a big cost. But it's, I don't know, it's yeah, I think this is a travel scholarship more than anything, and we should have there should be a dedicated program to that because it's super important and it's critical to what we do as a commission. But just a separate thing. It sounds awesome. I'm sure that there's a system in place for identifying students that would most benefit from this type of travel that is not indicated in this application. It's already quite long, but yeah.
Well, maybe we can go ahead and indicate that this is something we're inclined to want to support through a travel scholarship program that needs to be confirmed in terms of budget, and the guidelines have to be developed. But perhaps this could be even a use case and something we can kind of work with, you know, for this particular opportunity to kind of work through some of the key questions around how you would operationalize it. So I think it could be a great opportunity for us to push that initiative forward for travel scholarships. Apologies for the background noise. It's gotten busy at my household. The other question is that, and this obviously we can't know, but I'm increasingly skeptical that it will be possible to do a lot of international travel even by the end of the year, and especially involving minors who will not have had necessarily, maybe they will have been vaccinated by that point, but so that's, you know, I think that's just one consideration, but obviously this is contingent on what happens with the pandemic and safety. But this is one application that didn't attempt to do any kind of virtual adaptation. It was, you know, basically, you know, considering fully in-person travel. I think one thing that crossed my mind is through the international club, could we talk with Rebecca about how that club could even potentially start to virtually engage with all of the sister cities in the future, or some initiative around that too? And or if the trip is for France, this first one, how to start building connection and relationships with the high school students in Besançon in advance virtually. So I would have liked to have seen some recognition of the pandemic and the virtual realities too, and opportunities in the application.
You know, another question that we could consider is would we be willing to allow them to post to extend that into the following year? What, you know, for the in-person travel.
Yeah.
Just one more thing.
Yep.
One thing that I had to say, I did like that there were other funders that they were recruiting and that there would be fundraising by the participants.
Mhm.
I like that. I mean, I like that there's some skin in the game from a wide variety of people.
Okay. Why don't we move ahead to the next grant proposal, face-to-face portraits of our sister cities. So this is the second portraiture project, which was submitted by the Bridge Progressive Arts Initiative in collaboration with Speak Language Center, and could potentially be applied to all 4 sister/friendship cities. Anyone want to start?
I'm glad to, yeah, go ahead, Adrian.
We can trade off or rotate. Yes, what I liked about this proposal was that it would address all 4 cities. I really appreciated that. And I thought the budget seemed very carefully thought out. I kind of did a little math of my own just to kind of see, break it out by teacher, by hour, by however many students the proposal was envisioning, and it all seemed fairly reasonable. I guess my only question that just occurred to me today, I didn't think about this a week or 2 ago when I was looking at this, but would we really get buy-in? Would we really get community members? I think she envisions, I can't remember if it's 15 or 20 or 25 people per class. Will there really be 25 community members that want to sign up for Spanish, French, Italian, and English? And maybe the answer is a resounding yes, of course.
Adrian, I think
Oh,
you're talking about a different grant.
Yes, I think you're referring to the Speak one,
You're right.
which is the language training.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We can also, well, why don't you hold that? I think
I'm
this one's
sorry.
a portraiture with Speak. So
I
yeah, it is
gotcha.
confusing.
I heard Speak and my mind just went,
Okay.
okay.
But I'm capturing your comments, and I'll put it in my notes for the Speak when we get to that one. So
Okay.
hold that thought.
I
And we'll come
have-
back to it.
I have notes I'll say very quickly. I had the permissions, the rights and permissions question here too, because I really want to take full advantage of whatever outcome there might be. And I really liked the idea of the goodwill of gifting the final artworks to the members in the cities. I had a question about how the sister cities would determine who are the 2 people who would be portrayed. But the more we talk today, I do realize we're talking about, 1 artist and 1 subject. So 8 artists and 8 sister city citizens. It is a fairly limited number of people that are directly involved, though with the idea of an exhibit in the windows of the Bridge facility or gallery. And then I just always envision a lot of online stuff, a lot of online exhibiting and maybe, sharing about the experience. So in that way, more people would be involved. But it does seem on the surface, it has a more limited number of directly impacted persons than some of the other projects.
Thanks, Adrian.
Actually, the Bridge has a face-to-face up right now. Not this one, but they have a showcase going on right now outside of their location. This is, I don't know, I like that this has been a program they've been doing for a while and that they're thinking to include our 4 sister cities. I know there was an artist a while back that included our 4 sister cities in a bus design that didn't really have any traction after that. And I love the idea of having a piece of art or having some art that represents all 4 of our sister cities. And while this is one that eventually will be gifted, I think that's, I like that is a concept and something that we can share.
And just jumping back in, I was curious if this is their first international dimension, because the proposal made some reference to that, that this ongoing series or project they've been doing and this sister city facet would potentially be the first time they've sort of gone international with it. And I thought that was a strong point.
Dave, you want to go? I can go last.
Well, I don't want to be a wet blanket again, but I think if we had unlimited funds, I'd be intrigued by the idea of doing 2 different portraiture projects. But I just feel like, given that we don't have unlimited funds, I'm not sure we'd want to spend half of our money or as much of our money on 2 portraiture projects. So I would suggest choosing one or the other, or as I said earlier, my initial impulse was, is there a way to have them collaborate on something? But, and I tended to agree with others that the other portraiture project was more compelling, but I don't know.
I tend to agree with Dave personally. I had a number of questions about it for me, and I don't blame them, but it seems like an opportunity for 8 artists to have paintings that are commissioned by them. I mean, it seems like an opportunity to provide, what would amount to employment for the 4 artists. Each one would be getting, I guess, $400 per commission. And it seems to me that the number of people impacted is pretty narrow. I also had questions. They said that a selection committee would be established, I presume, in each sister city to determine what 2 people are painted. I don't know. Maybe they would want to do that. I don't know if they would or not. But I agree that the other portraiture project is more compelling.
Okay.
This one did not mention them being displayed on their website, although I have to believe that it probably would be. I don't know. This one's just seemed more narrow to me than the other opportunity, and I agree. I don't know if we would consider doing 2 similar projects like this.
Okay. Well, what I'm hearing here is probably we're leaning toward a no, but we could also potentially suggest a connection between Mountainside Arts and Bridge Progressive Arts Initiative. We could, suggest the 2 connect, but we can revisit that if that's something we want to consider. But I'm also hearing we don't want to make a final decision until we've been through everything and kind of totaled up the numbers too. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would think we would get more bang for our buck if we applied the funds to the other project that could be, used by the sister city and their side of the project. That's my perspective.
Okay, that sounds good. And sorry, Adrienne.
Yeah, I just wanted, I want us to be really clear when we respond, when that time comes, about suggesting that they perhaps connect with Mountainside Arts. If I'm the proposal of the first project, I might think, well, what would there be any funding coming my way?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit murky.
It's a good point. Dave, did you have thoughts on how we might go about making that connection or brokering that kind of collaboration in this instance?
There is precedent for this, and it's unfortunately not great precedent because a couple of years ago we had 2 applicants who were both proposing to do a particular program in Winneba, a very similar kind of a program, and we said, we're not going to fund both of these, but if you guys can put together a joint proposal, we'd love to entertain it. And unfortunately, they couldn't reconcile their visions in there. So, but, so I don't know, that's not a very encouraging precedent, but, and in this case, it might simply be that we just go with one over the other. You know,
That's my inclination.
yeah, I think that's probably, because I think Adrian's right about, you know, if we're not offering the funding to both, it's, what's the incentive? So,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we can just reconfirm at the end that this is a, you know, whether this is a firm no, once we've kind of been through the rest. Number 4, Sister City Conversations. This is the one you were starting to respond to, Adrian. Virtual group Italian, French, Spanish, and English courses and cultural conversations, submitted by Speak Language Center, Christina Ball, and would affect all 4 sister cities. $3,500 requested. Adrian, did you want to say anything further about this? You mentioned you thought that it was well thought out and clear.
Yes, I generally, well, I'm a language teacher, so I'm always going to be pro language. And I apologize, I'm getting a message that my internet is unstable, so I don't know how my audio is coming through. But what I did like is that it applied to all 4 cities. I thought that was a real strength. And then I would just hope that there would be enough interest to fill those language classes. I mean, it's very concrete. It's not, you know, it doesn't have bells and whistles on it. It's just learn the language or learn some of the language of our sister cities. And I like that idea.
I personally found it actually a little bit loose in its application. You know, for learning a language, I think people either want to, for a beginning language learner, I think people would either want to really learn the language or for an event really get into the culture. And I don't know if you can really learn a lot of language, especially if it is basic, by combining the two. Now, if you wanted to learn phrases that related to certain cultural elements, I could see you probably doing that. But I also was concerned about having language training when you have, it was proposed that there would be participants from both countries at the same time. I think if you're, I know that there is benefit from learning from people who are speaking the language that you're trying to learn. But if you really have a closer to equal number of learners, I think it would be hard to be teaching both, let's say, Italian and English simultaneously in a single session. I don't know. That seemed a little awkward to me. Also, I know that I think they were looking at Winneba and as a kind of an ESL opportunity. I don't know, that seems a little weird to me. I would think, like if I was going to do something with Winneba, I would think it would be interesting to have maybe comparisons in, you know, our dialectical speech or, you know, or idioms and learning. I'm sure, and Dave, you could probably, I'm sure you know this better than I do. I'm sure they have things that they say that are different from the way we would say them here. And for me, and vice versa, I think it would be enjoyable to learn how, you know, how they say certain things that are different from us. But I thought that having them being the source of the ESL opportunity was, I don't know, awkward. I thought that was a little bit awkward myself. I think having 25 people per class is, I think you were alluding to, Adrian, I think that's a tall order. And then I believe it was this one where they said, well, maybe we won't even have people from the other countries participate if there's a problem with the difference in time zone. So I don't know, for me, the application was kind of amoebic a little bit. And as much as I love other languages, you know, I'm a German speaker, I don't know, I wasn't fully sold on this one myself.
I'm concerned about the buy-in too from the community, and just folks being interested in doing this, especially if the time zone thing results in this just being like a language course. I don't know. Yeah, it is a big concern.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Dave.
No, I fully agree with Damon's comments, and I was actually kind of a little blown away when, you know, they got to Winneba and talking about teaching ESL. Winneba is very rich in, you know, the native dialect there is, it's fascinating. Why would we teach English when they have their own language? But one thing I thought though, where I do agree it's sort of open-ended, but one way that this could be really helpful, and I don't know if this is something they'd be interested in, but when we have groups going over to France or Italy or Ghana or Guatemala, it sure would be helpful to have some language instruction in advance of those trips. We do a little, whenever we bring a group to Ghana, we do a sort of a very quick language immersion in the Fanti dialect, which is the local dialect in Winneba. But it's literally an hour and a half. Like, I'd love to have, you know, for anybody that wants a deeper dive into French or Italian or Spanish or Fanti, to be able to take a class. So I don't know if there's a way we could factor that in, or when people are making these trips, but in general, I just thought it was, I think amoebic was a good word for it. So.
Interesting idea, Dave, for a potential partnership, if there was a way we could, you know, for any organized trip to sister cities, set up some sort of language training opportunity for community members in the future. So that might be something, a piece of, or an idea we could potentially float with Speak and see, you know, what they're, you know, how they would think about that. I liked the general idea of this, and like Adrienne, really would, I think the idea of more opportunities to learn another language is, I think, overall, I think would be a nice asset for the community. I did have a question about the two-way learning, you know, methodology. How would that work? And it seems to favor, you know, learners in Charlottesville compared to learners in our sister cities. And it was also unclear to me how instructors would be identified. So there are a lot of like operational kind of implementation questions I had around this, but I liked the vision, but maybe it needs some more shaping and you know, maybe fit for purpose around our, you know, opportunities like immediate travel coming up, or perhaps working with like if there is a group going to Based on Soul from Charlottesville High School, have they all trained in French already? Do they have that skill, or do they need some quick immersion? And could we partner with Speak to help support that? So maybe there are ways we could design some sort of collaboration in the future like that.
I could see it being considered within the budget, much the way we have the travel scholars, travel scholarships, that, you know, funding for travel similar to funding for language training. Those two things seem to be perhaps separate from these ideas of grant projects, specific and unique projects. So maybe that's a consideration in the future as far as having a line item in the budget that is always there, if we always have something for travel scholarships.
Okay, so I'm hearing a probable no here, but maybe wanting to kind of open up dialogue with Speak around some language training possibilities in the future that are more targeted toward specific needs around upcoming trips and so forth, rather than kind of an open program as designed. Does that sound right?
Yep.
I was also, one other thing just for our notes and our response to them. Their initial course, they had planned on beginning in March, like in a few weeks. And then they said that if the program was successful, they would potentially have a second round. And it didn't, I didn't know how that fit into their budget. If the budget was just for the first round or if the budget included the first and the second. Anyway, just an added note.
Okay, thanks. Why don't we move ahead? We're almost at 5:30. I just want to do a time check here. Does anyone have a hard stop, or could we try to get through we have five,
I
six,
figured this
seven,
would be a
4 more
meeting where
remaining.
we worked until we got it done.
I have to leave by 6:40.
Okay,
Okay, well, maybe we can aim to try to wrap up by 6. Does that
Yeah,
seem?
we better not be here at 6:40.
whatever. I'm good by 6:30, whatever.
Okay, we might
Let's
need
get
to
it
pick up.
done. Let's
We'll
get it
pick up the
done.
pace a little. Okay, let's move on to number 5, which is Wayway and Ixtaton Foundation proposal. Anyone want to start with that one?
I love it, and it is very needed. As somebody who has been trying very hard to get any information from Wayway's government, it is about impossible. Figuring out the names of people without the Ixtaton Foundation, I don't know how we would have done this. Granted, we would have never, like, Ixtaton is doing a lot of work here, but like, this is so needed if we are to have a functional friendship city with Wayway. I think it's a well-written proposal. It is something that I think we would have had to have worked towards anyway as a commission in order to set up any sort of communication with folks in Wayway. And I love the inclusion of Computers for Kids. That's just a great local group, and their dedication to providing internet access to kids here. Like, they need a good, like, the fact that a government website, like, there needs to be some web presence for Wayway in order for us to make this work. It's going to be virtual for the next year or two anyway. So let's try to make it as good as it can be. I am all for this.
Great. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I agree. Or Adrian, you want to go? I can go.
Go ahead,
next.
Damon. I'll come in after.
I totally agree. I think it ought to be funded. I did have a few questions. One is they mentioned an e-commerce webpage to be created, and it looked like it was going to be developed in Spanish, which I think makes sense. But I'm wondering if there will also be an English version or a button that you can push to have it in English, simply because if we create this, and it is a sister city funded program, having it exclusively in Spanish is going to considerably limit the number of people here who could benefit from it, who could make connections to the people in Wayway. I think it would be more used among people there as opposed to kind of part of an exchange. And I know that they need the tech infrastructure. I totally get that. But if you're going to have an e-commerce web page, I would think having it also in English would be beneficial for them. And maybe I interpreted that wrong, but it seemed to me that element was going to be exclusively in Spanish.
Certainly something we can suggest.
Also, if we were to fund this, I think it might be nice for there to be a way for the people there that use the product to see that it was provided by the Charlottesville sister city commission. I don't know if that would be, you know, a little plaque put near the like antenna thing, or if it's maybe a part of the name of the Wi-Fi or something. But I don't think it's, you know, I don't think it's selfish to illustrate that, you know, our relationship between our two cities, and so people know, you know, that we want to be friends, and we're glad to provide this resource to help develop that friendship.
I don't think there'd be an issue with that. It seems like the government there is all for this friendship progression process.
Now I might be the wet blanket. I guess I just feel some tension around it feels like it's a funding their getting a city website, a municipal website. And that might, if it's framed in terms of a goodwill gesture, another piece of moving from Friendship City to Sister City, I guess I can see it working that way, but it doesn't exactly feel like a grant that's about collaborative connections. I mean, it feels like building a road, like a road has to be built. Otherwise we can't talk or collaborate in any way if we don't have the road. So clearly it's needed. But I think, Damon, you're right. I did see, I mean, there's a sentence there that says we would, something about we are fully committed to helping build a full e-commerce website. So it felt like there was a lot of emphasis on this website serving for commerce. But then there were some mentions of the website serving for just plain communication. Between us and them, I don't know. Between them and them, that seemed definite. A lot of partners involved, which I guess could be a good thing, but in some ways felt a little bit overwhelming, sort of like, how will all this work? And then my question too then is, does it end up being owned by, does the website end up being, it says, you know, there's a charge, a $600 charge for 3 years of hosting. So who's hosting the website? Is it the Ixtatan Foundation? And to what extent are we funding? It felt a little bit like we're funding other people's work to do.
Definitely understand that. When I think about how we are ever going to form a partnership with Weiwei outside of the Ixtatan Foundation, it's got to be web-based in some way. So I don't know if there's a creative way for us to put, because I agree, I think setting up a government like a municipal website, it's not, doesn't look great on our end, but there needs to be some sort of communication, some sort of way for us to connect with Weiwei via the internet. And currently there is none, other than like the 2 emails we've received from their, like, there's no web presence.
For me, while there are these elements of like the city web page and this e-commerce page, the focus and the very first sentence of the proposal is the purpose of the project is to provide a set of tools to better connect Charlottesville with its newest sister city, Huehuetenango. The foundation will ensure that there is a well-installed internet solution with a wireless extender access point in the city. So for me, the primary, and maybe I did not interpret it fully, but it seems to me with that being the very first thing that they lead with, that the primary project is providing Wi-Fi to the citizens. And I think that's worthy. I mean, yes, it's kind of like building a road. I mean, I get your point there, but it is like a 5,000 mile long road that connects instantaneously, and that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cheaper than a road. I mean, but no, I mean, I get your point. But I do think I think it's worthy, especially the Wi-Fi, the public Wi-Fi element for me is particularly useful.
Dave, what do you think?
I really like where this project is going. I like the idea of establishing, an internet connection and using our grant dollars. I have no problem using our grant dollars to do that. I have no idea why we would pay $500 for a laser engraver to make souvenirs. I mean, that doesn't, I don't understand that. So I wouldn't fund that. And maybe there's other things we can take a harder look at. But in general, I like the project. I'm not sure I'd fully fund the request, but I like where they're going with it.
I was also curious where the computer hardware elements were going to go, if they were going to be, at the local office here, or if they're going to be purchased and used in Wayway. That wasn't clear to me. And definitely that you mentioned, the 3D printer. I didn't, if I want a souvenir from Wayway, I want something made by someone in Wayway.
Right, exactly.
I want some
Traditional
coffee,
crafts,
and you
yeah.
can't make coffee with a 3D printer, not to my knowledge, anyway.
So
I'm just kidding. No one send me coffee.
I found it to be a creative proposal. I think it seems like there's been a lot of thoughts and ideas and partnerships and discussion around this, and a nice foundational opportunity to work with Ixaton Foundation and start building more connections and communications with Wayway. It is kind of an infrastructure project. I would agree with Adrian on that. But it's a relatively small investment that could potentially have, big impact in terms of, for the people of Wayway, but also hopefully for ease of communications to really support the development of this relationship. So I lean toward yes, and would agree maybe some of the elements could be removed if we wanted to suggest some things be dropped from the budget, but that was kind of where I was leaning. I also had a similar question to Adrienne about who will own the website ultimately. Will it live with Ixaton and hosting, or does it get handed over to the municipal government? That was a little unclear to me, but I think we would want to see it become owned and further developed by the government, right? Ultimately, or is that the kind of the end user we would hope to see manage this website?
As long as it's not us. I mean, as long as they don't anticipate us being the owner. I mean, I don't know. Whether it's the city or the foundation, as long as someone cares for it, and wants to hopefully not let it go by the wayside. And if that is the foundation, if they're more capable and motivated to do that, then I would say hopefully them. But if it's the town, and if having it with the city is a more long-term solution, then I would want it with them.
Well,
But I don't know what that answer is.
I wonder if we have or if we're able to say we have either a contingency or a desire that this end up being owned by Wayway. Because I guess I don't like the idea, just the idea of a middleman. I mean, if we are going to fund some very basic infrastructure for our friendship or sister city, I think we want the end result to be in the hands of the city. So I think we do. I personally, I have some feeling about that, like would want to have some say over ultimate landing places or final outcomes, or however we phrase it.
Does everyone agree with that?
I mean, my one thought is, I don't know that much about the government of Wayway, but I know that sometimes there are, corruption issues in certain places, and I don't know if that would impact this situation or not. I certainly have no reason to believe that there's that kind of issue in Wayway, but I don't know. So sometimes an NGO could potentially be a safer solution than a city. But I don't know the answer to that. Maybe the city is the better long-term solution.
And I think in this case, we have to sort of rely on and put our trust in the Ixoton Foundation to
Yeah.
help navigate that too. But I think we can make our intention clear that this should live with Weiwei, and hopefully Ixoton can help to steward that to a good outcome.
I would think Ixoton
A
would not
landing
want
place.
to eternally fund that.
Probably not too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be part of, a larger project and vision they have. So, okay. Are we good with at least a recommendation to partially fund at around $3,500 unless we want to shave anything else from the budget? Do we have some general agreement around that? Adrienne, I know you had reservations. But what is-
I can be convinced about this, the worth, the value of this.
I think it's worth asking if the laptop with camera would be used there or here. Me personally, I think it's more valuable being used there. And I think that makes more sense than.
I thought they said, I
That was
thought
my
I read
assumption, but-
something that the laptop would be there on their side. That
Yeah.
that laptop might be the only device that.
I think it would just be worth clarifying that is the case.
Okay, thanks. I'll note that down, and if anyone finds it, we can include that just to confirm in our feedback.
Did you say 3,500, Amanda? Because
I
you
said around 3,500. The total requested was 4,000, but with the $500 laser engraver, I removed that. But if there are other places in the budget you all think we should potentially negotiate down or suggest removing, we can potentially come back with, for a lower budget proposal. Okay, but let's come back to that. So just kind of 3,500 to keep as we keep track of the dollars. Number 6, pen and paper make sisters right, from Libby Edwards Albo, and 100B WCMA. This is the Pen Pal project, proposed at $4,000.
So I like the idea of it, but my one concern about it is, can we as a city funded organization fund a program that excludes people based on race and gender? The program specifically says that it would be for African American girls. And I think there's value in the program and value in making that connection. But my thought is this would be better funded by a private organization or a nonprofit organization as opposed to a government organization. I think of our U.S. Department of State programs that I've worked with and seen. And there's definitely, circumstances where there have been, gender-based programs, but I don't think I've ever seen one that funds activities that excludes people based on both gender and race. So while I like the idea and I think it would be valuable for the students, that was my biggest concern. And I also had a number of logistical questions. They talked about creating intro kits, and I was curious what would go in there. It looks like the plan is to initially to have the participants come together and write letters and send them on the trip in April. Dave, I presume that's your trip that you've been planning, or was
Yes.
that is? Okay, I
Yeah.
thought so. So they would have them come together and write, and then send the materials over in that trip. But then thereafter, their plan was to come together once a month to write letters. So for me, the timing of that is challenging. I mean, I don't know. My son just got a birthday card from my brother in Oklahoma. It took 45 days to get here. And I think having pen pals that you basically, with that time frame, you would need to write, the letter would need to get where it's going in 2 weeks, and they would write, and then they would get it back here in 2 weeks. I think that is unlikely, logistically. There are also my questions regarding the funding. It wasn't clear. So their funding was $7,000 total. And it wasn't clear to me what elements they would be asking us to cover. But the first two lines in their budget were for travel for $4,000. I question, I mean, that seems odd to me because this isn't primarily a travel related grant to my understanding. I would understand more the intro kits, presuming those are, like kind of paper. That seems a little high for me, even with that, and monthly meetings at $900. And I don't know, as much as I like the idea of pen pals, it seems like, I don't know, I had a lot of discomfort with funding it the way it's currently stated, at least.
Thanks, Damon.
Dave, do you want to jump in before I do?
Well, I like the idea of the program, just as Damon said. This is one of those where I kind of like with the last one, where I don't feel like it warrants a full funding, the full $4,000 that they're requesting. To me, it's sort of similar to the project we funded last year with Myra Anderson, where she asked for, I think it was around the same. I think she asked for 4,000. We ended up giving her 2,500, and she was able to pull it off, or she's about to pull it off with that amount of money. So I do think there's a lot of fluff is probably not the right word, but I do think there's certainly areas of the budget that aren't as essential. So for instance, I don't think this requires 2 separate trips to pull off. I do think having the one visit to make that person-to-person contact and to set up the infrastructure makes sense. I don't know why the welcome kits cost as much as she's projecting. So I wouldn't be inclined to support the full $4,000, but I really like where she's going with it. And I love the fact that the 100 Black women of Charlottesville are sponsoring it and involved. They have the group of young women, the girls that, so that's already in place. So that's not something that Libby's going to have to create from scratch. So it's sort of taking an existing resource. I will say in the last several years, the city has funded through their equity fund a number of projects that are specifically targeted to the African American community. So that's not a precedent for the city, for city dollars. So that doesn't bother me too much. But I just think it's something that could be scaled down.
Mm-hmm. Dave, just a question. Do you think that the travel associated with this should be funded through a grant project, or is this more of another case for a travel scholarship? Or do you think it's I guess, yeah, it sort of gets back to the question of, is travel necessary to advance this project? But maybe it's just negotiating down on the budget to drop one of the trips.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
in my mind, this is more of a project as opposed to just funding a trip.
Okay.
And I do think the travel, as I said, is really helpful. I've seen myself many times over where trying to set something up in Ghana through by phone or by email is really difficult. And
yeah,
if you're there in person, it just makes it so much easier. So I can see the value in including some travel funding in the budget.
Okay.
I just don't know whether it's going to require 2 trips.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I wasn't clear, it wasn't clear to me. I mean, I wonder if there's someone already planning to go on the trip that is connected with the organization. Do you know?
She's planning to go in April.
She's already planned to go.
Yeah.
So this person, so why would she need funding to go if she's already planning to go?
Well, I mean, I assume she's looking for funding to help to so that she can go. I mean,
So she's not one of the people we
no,
provided
no,
funding for,
no, she's not a travel scholar. She never applied for travel scholarships.
but she's currently planning to go already.
Yes.
Got it. Now, don't we have a policy of not providing funding for the individual applicants? Or I know,
No, travel funding has been built into many grants. in the
right,
past. Yeah.
that's right, and it wouldn't go.
Compensation for the applicants, like covering their time, is the
That's right.
the one that's
Yeah,
been more of a prohibition. Although I did note that that's noted in the review guidelines, but not clearly spelled out, I don't think, in the application. It might be something we need to revisit for the next application, just to make sure that that's clear. I just kind of took note of that. Okay. Go ahead, Adrienne.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on this proposal. I have to say I've learned a little bit more from Damon and Dave than I got from the proposal. I couldn't say if I liked the idea because I didn't understand the idea. I really didn't understand how the writing letters program related to the travel. And I do have logistical problems with it. First of all, I have a problem with writing letters anymore. And I feel like if we want to help these particular communities, and I personally have no problem with limiting it to young women, Black women, et cetera, particular communities that might really benefit from an idea like this. But I would rather try to get them using tech or emailing. Now, I hope I don't, embarrass myself, because I heard you say that emailing with Ghana is really difficult, but it feels sort of like funding an old school skill that may not be as helpful to these young women. And then the issue of how many letters are going to be received before they go, and why are they going in April? And I didn't know there was a trip planned. So I was in the dark about that, but it feels like it's all over the place. Humanitarian activities, one trip or two. I couldn't understand what the money was going to pay for. So while I love the idea of pen pals, or I used to back in the day, but it feels like an old technology. And so I'm behind educational, skills building, etc. And the young women traveling to Ghana to do what, I would want to know. And how do they have some activity before then that happens? And then how do those two activities relate? I guess I just feel like there's so many unanswered questions on this that I'm left with still.
I was also confused, Adrienne, about even knowing that they were that the group is going to Winneba in April. It wasn't clear to me that the funding provided would ultimately go to the students eventually going to Winneba. That did not, I didn't think so, yet they still talked in the proposal about students possibly going to Winneba. When I think, and I am old school, and I used to write letters all the time, and I really value kind of the pen pal thing. But I just know logistically, it takes, I don't know about the postal service in Ghana, but
The postal
for
service
example,
in the
when I get postcards from my parents when they're in Cabo San Lucas, they mail them in like February, and I get them in April. you know? And like I just said and I know the COVID times are unusual times, but the Postal Service is not exactly speedy nowadays. And for Guatemala, I believe you shouldn't even try to use a Postal Service, that you should try to use UPS or something like that. So I don't know with the practicality how well it would work. And I really doubt that you could have a monthly back and forth writing, hard copy letters.
I would encourage us to not get too focused on the details, because I think we have to entrust the applicants or any recipients to kind of define that further. And I think that would be part of the purpose of the trip initially, to make those kind of connections. But there, I think we could ask some of those questions, but I imagine some of the specifics around how this relationship will work would be ironed out through more of that in-person, exchange and relationship building that is proposed in April. And then a vision of that the girls that participate in the Pen Pals program would ultimately potentially be interested in deepening that relationship and traveling to Winneba one day, and that would be a great outcome. But I didn't understand that this grant proposal would cover their future travel. I don't think that's included in this. That was my interpretation.
So Amanda, and all of you, you're understanding that a group of young women identified by the BWMCA write some letters, and they get put in a packet that are carried by the folks going in April?
That wasn't clear to me exactly how it would work, but I imagine that's part of what she needs to figure out, is how this would work.
Right.
Who are the students in Winneba? Do they have access to email? Could that be an email relationship, or could it be through the mail, or carried by people who go back and forth to Winneba frequently? But I imagine a lot of that will be worked out potentially, and that's something we could encourage. Maybe if she were to go, come back and share some specific ideas around how this will be implemented. That could be something we kind of make an investment in kind of building the relationship, and then see where that could go.
For me personally, I don't see how we can decide to fund this right now. I think there are too many loose ends. For me, it seems like we asked, when she goes to Winneba in April, that she really try to flesh out the opportunity more, and then come back next year with a more, clear and concise application. As nice of an idea it is, I don't think it's our role to totally tell them how to do their proposal. For me, it's not there enough. I'm not saying I'm not one to blackball. If you all wanted to do it, I'm not going to be
Let's hear from Kate too. Kate, did you have any feedback you wanted to share on this?
I think, I'm a little concerned about how open-ended parts of this application are. Particularly, I don't know what intricates are. Like, I don't know why they're $1,250. I don't know what those are exactly and why they cost that much. So that's something I'm concerned about, is just like that seems like a lot for something that's a pen pal program. It seems like within this, it's sort of like a mix, like it's a travel scholarship meshed in with a grant proposal, which are two separate things. I think this is really, I think there needs to be a little bit more planning into this sort of thing. I like the idea of pen pals, and it seems like, I don't know, David, maybe you can go more into this. I don't know what the internet situation is like there, and if kids could possibly connect on that, and that this might be the only way that we can effectively communicate with folks in Ghana.
Yeah, that's the issue, is as much as we would love to help, encourage technology and sort of move beyond antiquated mechanisms of communication. But the reality is on the ground in Ghana is that very few people have internet access. A lot of people have cell phones, and so they can text, and it's primarily through WhatsApp. But in terms of email and regular internet access, Wi-Fi is almost non-existent. I mean, you have to go to a certain hotspot. There's no community Wi-Fi to speak of. Laptops are certainly not widespread. Even in schools, most schools don't have computer labs. So it's one other thing which I don't think she talked about in the grant application, but we've been trying to figure out a way for quite a while to connect school children, young children from the two communities. This is the first project that's come forward that I think could actually make it happen. Again, I think the budget's too large. The budget request is too large, but I would really like to see us support it if at all possible. And and maybe down the line, if this thing really takes off and gets support on its own, maybe down the line, part of their own fundraising could be fundraising for internet access or or technology access for kids in Winneba. I just don't see that happening right away. So.
I mean, one thing that also comes to my mind is it's a pen pal program, but I don't see any budget for postage. And I know that's, it just seems like it's not clear enough for me what's going on, what they want to do.
Yeah, I would like to know, how many young women envisioned would be in the first cohort that takes this up, and so they're matched with an equal number of kids there. And would there be a little structure would they get a little guidance to make sure they get a letter out every 2 weeks or month or whatever the rhythm would be? Just information about how exactly would this program ideally work. And so how often would a young girl in Charlottesville get a letter back, assuming postal services functioned? I agree the value of learning to write. Well, I am a little bit, I don't do much in longhand anymore, but a grocery list. But the fact that that's a viable technology still, I just would like more explanation of the value that brings, and what are some of the practicalities of how it would play out.
Okay. So I think I'm hearing kind of I think we're not necessarily fully aligned at this point around what to do. I've heard partial funding or do not fund. So maybe we need to, I'd like to suggest we move on to the last two, kind of then step back and take stock and kind of come back to this one in terms of whether there's a, at least would partial funding even be feasible? And if so, what would that look like? And, what do we need in terms of further information around the budget and some of the practicalities and so forth to approve that? Does that sound okay to move forward at this point? Okay. Okay, so
Sure.
7, reading Ghanaian voices at the Virginia Festival of the Book. Dave, do you want to start? Because I know you already chimed in on this one via email around potentially treating this as more of a sponsorship case, which
Right.
I also agree with. But would you like to explain that a little?
Yeah, in the past, when for instance, the book festival has come to us, this is not a project. This is a one-off speaker thing, and which has its value, but it really is a different beast. And so in the past, when they've come to us for funding, I know last year, maybe the year before too, we agreed to consider it as we put in, I think, $1,000 last year. As a sponsorship, and it gave us some visibility, so our name was attached to it. And honestly, the the speakers that we funded last year, the author that we funded last year, and these two authors that they're looking to have us fund this year really have little to do with Winneba, or actually nothing to do with Winneba, very little to do with this part of Ghana where we do our work. It's a little, just to be very blunt, it's a little frustrating because we've suggested authors, one in particular, who has a direct connection to this part of Ghana where we do our work, and to the book festival, and haven't gotten any traction. And last year, their excuse was, her name is Yag Yasi, and last year their excuse was, well, she hasn't published in the last year. I guess they only bring in speakers that have books that have been published within the last year. That's what they said. Well, she just published a book in 2020, a wonderful book. I've read it twice now, and yet they're not bringing her. So it's a little frustrating. And she's and her book is now being read by all the 10th grade students at CHS.
Right.
There's her first book. So there's a lot of interest, and I'd love to see the book festival bring her to Charlottesville, or at least virtually in this case. But that's sort of a tangent. So I don't think this is a good fit for our grants program. If we want to sponsor it, I don't think there's I don't have an objection to it. Again, wouldn't be my first choice of a Ghanaian author to sponsor, but that's sort of irrelevant.
Thanks, Dave. Any feedback, and would we want to propose that this be considered for sponsorship by the commission? And I don't know that we have any insight on what the sponsorship budget looks like. I checked back to my records from last year, and we had, as Dave said, we had approved the Folklife Festival, I think, and it was Folklife Festival and Festival of the Book combined proposal for, oh, I'm thinking of the Pleven event actually from last year, Dave. That was Folklife Festival. It was a $1,000 sponsorship plus $1,000 from discretionary Pleven funding. But that event was canceled in the end, so the funds were not spent. But that's just, and then you're, I think, citing maybe the case from 2 years ago with the Ghanaian author. Would we want to make that recommendation, and do we agree that this isn't a great grant case?
Well, there's
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I mean, my initial impression was that this was a great opportunity, but now having heard Dave's experience from previous years, I can understand the concern about it and the fact that it doesn't have a close Winneba connection. I do think it would be, it would receive a pretty big audience in Charlottesville. So some type of funding would probably be, good for us to be associated it with the commission. Another question that came to my mind when we were talking about the Pen Pal program is the fact that the internet is not pervasive there, and the Winneba element for this application is exclusively online. So it makes me wonder, how that would work. How did it work last time? Did they have something similar?
No, I think because, well, the original proposal last time was that they were going to buy a number of books, if I remember correctly, and distribute them in Winneba and have a reading, I don't know what it was, a reading circle around those books. But since we didn't fund that project, that never happened. We just ended up sponsoring the speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Damon. I don't really see that as a terribly viable part of this project either. So. And again, folks in Winneba, if the author has no connection to Winneba or this part of Ghana, I'm not sure what I I don't know that they'd be terribly enthused about it.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Kate
I
and
feel
Adrian?
like I'm learning a great deal. I'm so appreciative. And really how we need to always keep in mind the very particular context of our sister city when we're evaluating a proposal for a project with that city. But the thing that's coming through for me is that I really want eventually to dig into our grants program promotional materials and application and be more specific about looking for ideas that are not primarily travel, that are not primarily language training, and that are not one-off events. That we potentially have some monies in our budget to help with those if, you know, we deem them worthy, et cetera, et cetera. But that for these grants, we're looking for a different kind of animal. But it's great to see people, you know, everyone tries to get money where they can, of course. But I would agree. I mean, I could see putting some money towards sponsorship for, you know, general goodwill toward Ghana. But Dave, you were very convincing in terms of we really want to prioritize Winneba where we can.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's very easy for us and the community to grab a country and not the city. I think I saw that some with the Italy proposal that we've not yet chatted about. But we are the sister city commission as opposed to the country commission. So yeah, I mean, I think there, you know, if there's something going on about Ghana and Charlottesville, I think it would be weird if we weren't somehow involved. But yeah, full funding might be more than we're willing to do.
Okay. Kate?
I mean, just reiterating all that, this is so much money for for such a short thing. Like, this is like almost $4,000 for one event that is virtual. It's not like, it's like, I don't know, when I first read it, I kind of thought in my head, like bringing the authors here, like all this stuff, but it's a virtual event. And it's just like, wow, I could not, like, I think sponsorship could be like an option, but
Yep.
that
Okay.
is, yeah, so maybe sponsorship, but definitely,
Okay.
yeah.
Why don't we then, it sounds like there's agreement that we can we consider making a recommendation to the commission to sponsor this particular virtual event of the Virginia Festival of the Book, not through grants funding, but through sponsorship as an option. So I think we could take that to the commission as a proposed option, and the funding level and so forth would need to be discussed. Does that sound okay?
Mhm.
Okay, great. We're the last one. Thank you all for sticking with it. And I know everyone's probably ready for a break. And so let's dive right into the last one, and then we'll try to wrap it up. Diversity, a journey into a new who speaks Italian? Bel Paese?
Bel Paese.
Bel Paese. Thank you, Adrian. I had to look it up too, and then I realized, oh, that's like Bel Pays in French. So great. Well, who wants to start on this one?
I'll start. Based on all the helpful things I've heard, and my own first reaction, to be honest, this too was very loose, not connected specifically to our sister city. And what I most missed were no specifics about the sociocultural debates that are common to both communities. If we're going to have a speaker series, and I like a speaker series, I wanted to know, well, what are these crucial topics? So I don't know where I stand in terms of how much funding, but definitely for me, I would not support the full funding. Here too, the virtual format makes me think, you know, some kind of honorarium for speakers, okay, but probably not as much as as identified. And then that's really all you need. If you, I don't know, I guess there's a little money needed for some promotion, but you're going to have 4 speakers get online and talk to an audience. You need to pay the speakers, and that's about it. I don't think that there's no course that's being designed. So I assume the speakers would determine their own talks. So those were, that was my initial reaction there.
Thanks, Adrian. Others?
I really wanted to like this one. I like the idea of having representation from all of our countries in our grants, but I just am not sold on it. It does seem to me like this is an Italy project with Poggio tagged on afterwards. To make it fit, you know, to make it connect.
Okay.
There, for one thing, you know, time-wise, that she has the program going through April in 2022. I don't know if that is, you know, kind of makes it questionable if it can qualify. But another big question I had was, the applicant is saying that she would be the person to plan and deliver the course, yet half of the budget goes to plan and deliver the course. So that to me sounds like it's a direct payment to the applicant, which I don't think we do.
Right.
Now, I did not
also
know,
had,
yeah, I didn't
also had
know
the
that
question,
at all.
yeah, I also had the question that, is she the applicant or is the University of Virginia the applicant? That wasn't clear to me. If the University of Virginia is the applicant, would there not be overhead or F&A costs for a grant proposal that aren't? I know typically when the Center for Politics applies for a grant, we usually have to pay overhead unless the funder says that they don't allow overhead. I don't know about us, but that, you know, as a person who writes grants from the University of Virginia, that comes to my mind. And that's not included in the budget. You know, another question, would the fall and spring sessions have the same themes? That wasn't clear to me. But ultimately, I just don't think it was a close enough fit to Poggio. And, you know, I would definitely personally not fund it for $4,000. My tendency is to not fund it at all. But if we were to fund it, I would say fund it for $2,000. But I would be comfortable with not funding it.
Okay. Kate and then Dave, and then maybe we can make a decision here.
One concern I have with this is that one of our commission members is mentioned in the grant itself as a collaborator for part of this, which she's from Poggio, which is great. I don't know if that makes this a conflict of interest at all, if her plan is to directly involve one of our commission members in with the grant process or with any, it doesn't mention that like she would be paid necessarily through this, but for planning and delivering the course, but it does mention very clearly that Stella would be helping organize it. Is that an issue at all, or is that just?
Well, we don't allow commission members to apply for grants. I think that's in the guidelines, if I remember correctly. But
Right.
if she's as a support to the applicant, maybe that's different. I don't know.
I suspect that the applicant did not speak with Stella. So I strongly suspect Stella doesn't know she's being mentioned. And the applicant knows Stella's from Poggio and plans to consult with her in terms of designing these lectures, you know, or planning out what it would be. So the, you know, the move is above board, but I agree, you know, Stella's involvement would need to be really fringe, if at all, or in terms of some consultation, or I'm not sure, but you know, that was an accidental thing, I think. But I agree with you, Kate, that it gets your attention.
I mean, beyond that, even if she wasn't on there, I agree with Damon wholeheartedly. There's just not a lot here. There's like, I wish she went into this with like very specific idea. Like, it's just very vague. And I think that I don't know, there could have been more thought put into this for sure. I think it's a great idea, but I think it needs to be more thought out.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I would not be inclined to support this one, primarily because I just don't see the Poggio connection. And I do think that's important as we're using grant funds to, you know, fund things that relate directly to our sister cities. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I agree with all the comments and concerns shared already. And I had thought maybe partial funding at best, but needing more clarity on the objectives, target audience, and budget were kind of my big takeaways. I would be in support of a no on this one. But if we had a strong case to partially fund, I could probably get behind that too. But I think the fact that Poggio is not specifically part of the scope here is, I think, a really strong case for not funding in this instance. Okay, so do we want to come back, or do we want to get to agreement on partial or not fund? Anyone want to make a?
Let me ask a question that might save us some time. If we agree tonight on which ones were not fund and which ones we could see partial fund, and I forget if we identified any that were fully funded, hands down. But if we got that far, could we get our questions out and then determine amounts? In other words, tonight, would be good enough if tonight we just determined which ones are
Right.
no's, full yeses, and partials?
I think that's where we want to get to, Adriana, because I think for all of them, we have some questions and need some more information. I think what we need to achieve is a recommendation to the commission for next Wednesday's meeting, and we can try to get some information beforehand. But we may need to open it up for final decision-making to the commission and make a recommendation of, you know, we can make clear no recommendations. We can make some yes contingent on X, Y, and Z recommendations, or we could also make partial funding recommendations. So I think let's see where we're landing, and we may still have some question marks. We only have a week between now and the commission meeting, so we may not be able to fully resolve all of this, but there may be some decisions we can already take.
Amanda,
On the ones where we have questions, would we share that? Like, if we had 4 proposals that have questions, one of us each of us take one and ask those questions?
Ideally, it would be nice if we could divide up some of that outreach among us and what we did last year, and it's all saved in the grants folder, is write a letter back, emailing it to the applicant to update them that we appreciated their application. We have some questions and would like, you know, further feedback on X, Y, and Z. Or if we're already, you know, at a point of making a final decision, we can notify them. If it's just for clarification, I think we could just do it via email through the, you know, in response to the original application in the Google email account. If it's just a clarifying question, like, could you provide a little more information on your assumption for this in the budget? But I think after the commission meeting, we'll want to issue formal letters, but which can request more information still.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's totally viable for the full commission to approve a grant contingent upon further information being provided to the satisfaction of the grants committee.
Mhm,
We've done that in the past, and I think that's perfectly acceptable.
mhm.
Amanda, is it possible for you to kind of tally up basically what we've kind of
Yes.
decided in this call?
Yeah, I was starting to do that, but also trying to follow the conversation, so I haven't fully completed it. Right now, you mean, Damon?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
wait a
Anyone
second.
have a calculator or something they can just maybe, if I
Sure.
can have some math support while I'm going through my notes. So number one, peace and creative connection through art. We had questions, but I think the position was we'd like to conditionally approve for 1475. That budget could potentially go up a little because there were a few things missing, but 1475 conditionally approved. The International High School Exchange was, I think, approved, though we have a number of questions to go back to.
I
Does
think that's
that,
the one where we said we'd recommend that for scholarships, travel scholarships.
right?
Right.
So
Yes,
that
thank you.
wouldn't
No,
be
so
included
that,
in
let's
this.
not, yep, no,
No.
okay. We're gonna table that or go back on travel scholarships. Thank you, Dave. I was trying to interpret my notes quickly. Okay, so then number three, face-to-face portraits, the Bridge Progressive Arts, likely no, because we only want to fund one portrait project. Number four, the Speak Language Center proposal, that was a no, but we want to explore other ways of collaborating with Speak around language training for upcoming trips. Number five, Weiwei was a partial funding of around 3,500, give or take. Pen Pals project was not quite resolved, partial or not fund. So we were a little divided on that one and have a number of questions. So we don't have that. That's not, I think we have to come back to that one. And 7 was the Festival of the Book, which we're going to defer to sponsorships. And then finally, Italy, which is, it sounds like a
No.
partial or a no.
We were pretty ruthless, I guess.
That, I mean, we, oh boy, okay.
4,975.
We were. With
That
that,
said, I mean, we do plan to, I mean, yeah, we separated some things out. We do plan probably to fund the trip. Was it the trip? No, the Weiwei. No, what was it?
Best Ensemble, the Charlottesville High School.
Right, okay.
There's scholarships.
4,000, right? So that is something. So if we had that, that would be almost
1,000-ish.
plus 4.
I don't quite follow. So far we have the 1475 plus 3,500 for the Weiwei.
Mhm.
And isn't the Besançon High School thing a separate category?
It
Since we have
is,
scholarship?
but I mean, just trying to put everything together in our decision making. If we added Besançon, that brings it up to 8,975. So let's say $9,000 for our help. And then we throw in $1,000, let's say, for the Festival of the Book thing. That's $10,000. So that still leaves us, a pretty considerable amount of budget. But that being said, I don't think we necessarily should just start doing things that don't fit. I mean, I think maybe we do go back and try to glean more information on the Pen Pal program. But I think that, I mean, I really think that's got a ways to go. I mean, it's a pen pal program that doesn't budget for postage. I mean, I just think that needs a whole lot more development. I'm not saying we should not fund it at all. I mean, I think especially considering the amount of that we have not used, we should probably find something.
But I think it's
Some way to
important
fund
that we know what we would be paying for in that project.
Yeah, I mean, that, and that's it. What are we paying for? I mean,
Well,
Can I offer, and I apologize because I have to leave in 5
Yeah.
but can I offer, an idea that we agree to, let's say, $2,500 contingent upon getting a lot more specificity from them on how this program would work. I mean, that way, because it is sort of a timing issue where they want to get this program started, this spring. I'd hate to put them off another year, but we
I
do
would
more
support that.
information.
Yeah.
I think
I would-
25 is a lot considering we don't know what they really want to do. I mean, maybe 2,000. I mean, my
Well-
feeling was like 1,000
Well, this, I think it's the
because
travel
it's a pen
cost,
pal program.
but it's the travel cost to set it up. I think
Right.
that they're looking at, I think that's the chunk, the biggest.
Right.
Right.
But she's already planning to go.
Well, I don't know what her financial situation is, whether her participation is contingent upon getting the grant or not. I just don't know. So,
I mean, if you all want to do 2,500, I'm not going to fight it. It seems like a lot for me for not knowing really what it is they want to do.
And that's
But if
contingent.
you
again-
don't want to do 25,
But that's contingent on getting a lot
Right.
more information and being satisfied that we
right,
understand the project. So we wouldn't approve it until we're satisfied.
right.
Are
Yeah,
you?
And if they
comfortable
don't
with that,
come
Damon?
through, then we don't
Yeah.
give them the money.
I mean, ultimately, I'm open to 4,000 if I had the right information.
Mhm.
I mean,
I
it
like
just
the
needs a ton of
2,500.
clarification.
I think 2,500 contingent on much more specificity on the operations of this program or idea.
Mhm. Okay, so so I've got notes on some of the questions and to put together. One last question: are we in agreement fully that we don't want to fund both portraiture projects? Just want to reconfirm that since we have some grant funding remaining.
I'm a little hesitant about completely throwing out the bridge idea just because that's an opportunity for a lot of exposure for us. I feel like the other project is awesome, but won't be a lot of exposure for our commission. The bridge does a lot of public art events that bring in a lot of people. And if we're
Mhm.
trying to sort of get our name out there, that's going to be a very, very opportune way for us to do it. And are we discounting this one just because there's two portraiture ones or because there's flaws in this one?
Some of my concerns with it were the element of creating a committee in the cities, and and that process for selecting the people and how much effort they would want from us. I mean, one concern I kind of had throughout the whole process were applicants leaning on the commission to do some of their work, and or public outreach or things like that. And I don't, and while I'm not necessarily opposed to a press release from time to time, I think when people make, provide applications, they should be applying it based on their plans for them doing the work and not anticipating that we will do some of the work for them. So this was one where it seemed like they were leaning on us a little more than I'm comfortable.
I think the question the big question for me was how will the city reps be identified, and we probably will want to discuss with the city liaisons for each of the four sister cities. I think I really thought this was an interesting proposal for the reasons Kate mentions in terms of exposure and that it covers all 4 sister cities. And so I think that's a positive also. So I feel like if we feel like we have additional funding, my vote would be to try to support this if we have balance remaining, because I think it's the next strongest proposal in the queue.
I agree. And I think maybe it's a good opportunity for us to ask the bridge if, like, what are their plans for identifying these folks and maybe getting some clarification there. Kind of under the idea of what we're doing for the Pen Pals program, like give us some more clarification and then we'll be ready to rock.
I like the idea too. I
Agreed.
think it's not just good exposure for us, but it builds bridges, you know, in some important ways, I think. So
Yeah.
I think maybe we could, I don't know if we can direct the bridge to say, here's how we would hope that you would identify these people by working with our reps. And, you know, maybe we can have some 2 cents there about.
Yes,
I didn't get
we
the
can-
sense that they were going to lean on us for a lot of stuff, Damon, but it may be that I didn't, you know, notice that in the details, but.
I mean, I think they were wanting us to help them with
I
that.
think that is a role that the commission can support in terms of linking, at least connecting.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
kind of the role of a city rep, to make some of those connections. So maybe we need to raise that in next week's meeting with the commission and make sure that there are no objections. And then we could make those introductions in our follow-up, and say, the city rep for Besançon is, and just give the names and email addresses and copy them in so they can be in contact too.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
but
Dave, I know you have to
wrap it
drop.
up.
Thank
But I
you
totally
so
agree
much.
I totally agree with where this conversation is going regarding the bridge. So thank you.
Okay,
Thank you all
thanks.
for
Thanks,
everything.
Dave, for sticking with us this evening.
Thanks,
See you next
Dave.
week online. Good night.
If you all want to fund it, I'm fine with it. I'm sure there would be benefits for it.
They've done a lot of great public art stuff in our city, and I think that they could, I don't know, based off of what I've seen from their work, I think that they're capable of really showcasing us in a positive light, which would be really awesome.
I would agree. And I think we should, in our communications with them, and I wanted to ask Amanda if we would have an opportunity to read what you send out, or if some of us craft what gets sent out.
I would welcome help with crafting
Yeah.
some of the responses too. I've got raw notes right now, but it's a pretty big lift to write all of those letters ultimately,
I'm happy,
and do that
happy to
outreach.
share that. Yeah, but what I was going to say about the bridge, in fact, is that we mentioned working with the city reps, and we also mentioned the business about you need to be okay with the permissions for this art
reproduce.
to be
Mhm.
reproductions to be used by us, because it can't just be we fund a project that the bridge has and then holds in a dark little castle. I know that's a terrible analogy, but I mean, we want to benefit from our own grants program.
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity for communications too. And if we had photo imagery of the portraits that we could then post on the website and feature in different ways, that would
Sure.
be fantastic for communications, I think.
Do we need to agree on an amount or a ballpark amount, like the way we have with the others?
I don't think anyone took issue or had big questions about the budget assumptions, but I'm just reviewing real quickly.
They were 4,000, I believe.
3950 was requested.
Okay. I'm okay
What
with
was
that.
the name of that one again? Was that face
Face
to
to
face?
face.
That was face to face.
Mhm. Yep.
So maybe we can make, as we're following up with these individuals, of like people we need to email, maybe we can just make on a Google Doc, like just check it off once we've sent that communication to them just before they respond. That way we're spreading the load for you, Amanda.
That
Well,
sounds good.
Could I would be willing right now to say I'll take X, Y, and Z, like just to know that this is on my to-do list.
Mhm.
And I'm happy with the Google Doc too, Kate. I just want, I mean, could we divvy them up now? who's going to write to who needs to be written to?
Yeah, that'd be great if you all don't mind sticking through, or I can make a proposal, but if you already have, if we can take 5 minutes and do that, that would be great. And then,
I'd be glad to take the Besançon exchange and follow
Okay.
up with them.
oh, International High School Exchange, Damon?
Yeah.
That sounds
With
good.
our
And
questions.
one thing about that in terms of following up with Rebecca, you might want to make sure to keep, I'm blanking on our
It's okay.
commission.
Would you mind just like emailing me your notes and the person that I should reach out to?
Thank
I'm
you.
just
would be
thinking our city education rep, her name is just blanking.
Neely, yeah.
Thank you, Neely, yes.
Oh,
Neely was looped in on some of the prior Rebecca discussions.
Okay.
So I think it'd be good to keep her, because she was helping to connect or navigate the schools around the insurance question and connecting Rebecca with the right people.
I'm happy to reach out to the bridge. I've done grant work with them in the past.
Okay,
So
Okay.
thank you.
And I could send my notes to you, Kate, too, on that, if that
Awesome.
would help.
that works. So just clarifying what type of responsibility the city reps, or what responsibilities our city reps have in securing these contacts.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe asking them a little more about, how they're thinking about identifying the city reps, and, we could
You mean the
connect
subjects from the
the
city?
subjects, yeah.
Yeah.
And would, and if they feel like they need some guidance or suggestions there, we can make connections with our commission members who are the city reps, or liaisons. And then there's the right to reproduce work. I can share all of my notes, which have a lot of detail from our conversation. They're a bit messy, so but hopefully from that you can each pull the kind of the essential questions. I tried to jot those down. I'll clean them up a little more and post them and email them out to you all. Okay.
in my communication regarding Besançon, should I go ahead and mention that we're considering them for a travel award as opposed to a traditional grant? Does it, I mean, they probably don't
I
really
would
care as
say-
long as they get.
I think one thing, if this is for like really immediate communications that are not formal decisions yet, I think we should, I think until we've had the commission meeting and kind of gotten approval on the next steps, I think our correspondence in the next week really needs to be limited to clarifying questions where we
Okay,
need more
all right, cool.
information. Because it may be that we don't have a line for scholarships, and
Right. Got
then
it.
what? So
Okay.
I'd say maybe we can
Just
come back.
follow up on our questions.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
So I don't know that we had questions for any others, because I'm looking, Mountainside Arts, did we have questions for them?
I'm looking at it. We had a few funding for how would sister cities send their portraits to Charlottesville. Reproduction
Okay.
right question.
Okay, I'll do that one.
Had they reached out to Boys and Girls Club already?
Okay,
That one?
yeah.
And going back to the fact that we have some capacity in our funding, I mean, the Peace and Creative Connection one, I mean, we could considerably up that funding if it made it where the group in Huawei could seriously participate. I mean,
Right.
this funding is basically all Charlottesville. At least that's the way it appears. I
Okay,
mean,
I can
we
build-
might have the capacity to double the funding, not that we,
I can say something diplomatically about have you considered the funding needed on their side of the arrangement, and if you haven't, what do you think that would entail?
Right.
you know,
I like that, Adrian. I wouldn't we don't want to set an expectation that we could fund more yet until we've maybe met next week. But But I think you could ask it in that way to see, and it may be just something they hadn't thought through yet.
Okay. So here was what I have. Adrian sending the questions to the Mountainside Arts. That's the children's portraits. Damon doing it for the International High School Exchange. And those are, help me again, those are questions. I thought all we were going to say was, are those some questions about the amount? Because I thought we were just going to potentially consider them for.
Which one are you asking about? Sorry.
This is the Besançon International High School.
Those questions were related to things like who is the organization responsible for the group, like,
Okay. So
and it's not us.
So more clarification.
And you know, if it is a requirement for the participants to be 18 years old, and that kind of question, not as much about specifics in funding. But I think, Amanda, you'll have notes like that in
I
your
have some
notes,
of that written out, but yeah, we shouldn't, in the communications, we shouldn't discuss funding levels or modalities or any, imply a decision yet. We're just seeking more information and clarification.
I think Dave should probably be the one to communicate with the Pen Pal program, just because I think he has a greater understanding of the circumstances there. And frankly, I wouldn't know where to start. So
Okay.
if you want to ask him to do that.
Does everyone have access to the Sister Cities Gmail account?
No, I
What's
don't
that?
think everyone has it.
I think just,
I do.
I've never looked at it, but I do have the passwords. Kate, you probably do too.
Oh yeah, I do. So that's another thing, Tim. Like, should we just share the passwords with folks to get these emails out? Would that be the best way to do it, or draft an email and send it to Amanda? Or
let's. I like that. Send it to him.
I'm sure Amanda loves that.
Amanda,
sorry. No, just like, I don't know.
Yeah, if you're able to help draft it, I can send it and copy the full grants
Copy
committee. I think
everyone.
it's
That
good
would
to
be
keep
great.
it in the Gmail account for the
have a point
commission.
person. Yeah, but we could write it, and then if you see something that needs to be slightly tweaked, feel free. But
Sure.
otherwise, you wouldn't have
That'd
to be writing.
That would be, very helpful if you all can just help with drafting the response. This is, again, for further information. And then we're going to need to formalize a response to each applicant after the commission meeting, a formal decision.
Okay.
I have access to the Gmail, so I don't need to send it to you. I can send it. That's fine.
I do have a question for y'all. So the applicant review grids. So I completed mine. Is that just for our own personal use, or do
Yes.
we don't save those officially?
No. Those are meant to just help to guide our review.
Okay.
And I mean, they're just a tool for reviewing. They're not a formal
Cool.
document. And so that's why I didn't ask people to send them in advance. It was just to really help us to take notes and take a systematic, kind of approach to reviewing each application. That's been past practice. Okay. I guess for this week, though, it doesn't feel to me like we need, I wonder, we probably do need to follow up with Festival of the Book quickly we can't really do anything until after the commission meeting because that's a sponsorships issue. So I don't think there's anything we need to act on right away this week for that one. And the Italy one, I think, was a no, right?
Right.
So I don't think we need to follow up on that when it's sort of a firm decision, just scanning to make sure. And then Dave will ask to follow up with pen and paper, the pen pals. And then finally, Weiwei. There were some questions for that one around ownership and a few other specific questions, but do we feel like we need to get those answered before next week's meeting, or are we pretty good on that one?
I don't think so. I think we've made the decision not to fund the engraver thing, and the other ones we can wait on.
I mean, my question about the laptop was just clarification on that would go to Weiwei. But if you all don't think, I mean, if you felt that was answered in there, I'm comfortable with that.
I feel like it was. I don't know why we would need a laptop here in Charlottesville for.
I don't know. I've included a laptop in a grant proposal before.
Well, we can check back to the application and see if that language is clear. The question that maybe is more important would be around the ownership and
I can do
the website.
that, those questions, a few questions, and I'm going to send mine to you, Amanda, in any case, and then you can give them a final once over. And
okay.
so I could do
Awesome.
both Huawei, the website, and the Mountainside Arts School portraits. Sorry.
Okay, so that's 2 for you, Adrian?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's great. I think we're good with that. That'll be a big help. And I'll share my notes with everyone too, so you can pull from those. And then what I'll also do in advance of next week's meeting is just kind of clean up the overview with our recommendation and outstanding questions that we can circulate before the meeting.
Yeah.
So we should ask in these emails, we should ask them to please provide us this information maybe by the end of this week. You know, there's a little pressure on, please get us this information so
Yeah.
that you could put it into those paragraphs or whatever you do, Amanda, on that recommendation
Right.
sheet.
If possible, if we have some of the questions resolved, that will help before the commission meeting. So yes, if we can get the responses back by, gosh, I'd say we might have to say Sunday or Monday morning at latest, but it depends. I mean, Kate, did you have a specific suggestion around for next week's meeting, how best to?
I'll put together an agenda that's just very vague about those points, and then what we can do is I'll make sure that folks who are not in the grants committee, like I'll put that link for the summaries and the grants again, just so folks can access it if they want to take a look. But I have the feeling next Tuesday we're going to be devoting all of our time to going over.
This will take up most of the agenda, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll just vaguely say that, and then if you want to make a hyperlink to that from the notes that you're making for a wrap up to the agenda, we can just sit in. That would be totally fine. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Sounds good.
Amanda.
Thank you all so much for this. Has been very thorough, and thank you all for your very careful and comprehensive review of everything. And I will share my notes with you and then work on synthesizing. And when you can send me your draft emails, I'll forward those through the Gmail account.
Okay.
Thanks also for your executive summary. That was no small feat in itself.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. That was, yeah, just pulling all of that. I'm sorry I lost one application in the spam box. That's it.
It was
It happens.
Yeah, thank you for helping to locate that, Adrian. Really appreciate your support with that. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Well, thank you all so much for your time and perseverance. Have a good evening. Thank you, Max and
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
the
you all.
city staff still online too. Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.